At 39 years old, Marcus Washington believed he understood the architecture of his life. It was a sturdy, if modest structure, built on a foundation of hard work and quiet consistency. His salary as a postal route supervisor for the United States Postal Service was a respectable $61,450 a year, an income earned through 19 years of reliable service, starting from the day he first slung a mailbag over his shoulder. His life was measured in the predictable rhythm of sorted letters, the hum of the LLV truck, and the quiet satisfaction of an empty sorting station at the end of a long day. The devastating truth was that the entire structure was a facade, and the demolition was scheduled to begin without his knowledge. It started on a Tuesday, October 17th at 5:12 p.m. The Charlotte sky was the color of a bruised plum, spitting a cold, persistent drizzle that matched the ache in his lower back. After a 10-hour shift covering for a sick colleague, all Marcus wanted was a hot shower and the leftover chicken and rice waiting in his refrigerator. He parked his 2014 Honda Accord, a car with 132,000 miles and a monthly payment he'd finally finished 2 years prior, in its designated spot at their rented apartment complex in Nodai. The apartment, a 2-bedroom they'd lived in for 6 years, cost them $1,650 a month, a figure Marcus always felt was a little steep. But Bianca loved the neighborhood's artsy vibe. He trudged up the 3 flights of stairs, the scent of damp concrete and his own exhaustion filling his senses. He unlocked the door, expecting the sound of the television or the scent of one of Bianca's expensive $80 diptyque candles. Instead, he was met with a profound and unsettling silence. The air was still and cold. A single manila envelope was propped against a vase on the polished entryway table. His name, Marcus Washington, was typed on the front. It wasn't Bianca's handwriting. It wasn't anyone's he knew. It looked official. His heart gave a strange, painful lurch. He had no idea that this single envelope was the opening salvo in a war he didn't even know had been declared. With a deep sense of foreboding, he slid his finger under the flap. Inside were not 1 but 2 sets of documents. The first was a petition for dissolution of marriage. The words swam before his eyes. Bianca Marie Washington, petitioner, versus Marcus Jamal Washington, respondent. The second document was a printout from their joint savings account at Bank of America. He scanned the page, his breath catching in his throat. The balance, which should have been just over $583,000, the sum of his inheritance from his mother, a lifetime of his own careful savings, and proceeds from the sale of his grandparents' home, was gone. The current balance read $72.14. He had delivered bad news his entire career: collection notices, jury summons, certified letters of termination. He had never, in all his life, received it. How could a man who spent his life ensuring every piece of mail reached its proper destination have missed every single sign that his own life was being rerouted, stripped for parts, and sent hurtling toward a dead end? We're often told to look for the big signs, the dramatic fights, the slammed doors. But what happens when the betrayal isn't a storm, but a quiet, calculated erosion happening right under your nose? For Marcus, the answer was about to become brutally clear. If you've ever felt underestimated or had your trust shattered, let me know in the comments how you found the strength to fight back. Their life together, looking back, had been a masterclass in domestic camouflage. For 12 years, Marcus had believed they were building a future. In reality, he was merely funding a present he wasn't fully invited to. The facade was constructed of small, seemingly normal moments, each one now glinting with the sharp edge of deceit. He remembered their Saturday mornings. He'd be up at 6 a.m., the force of habit from his job ingrained in his body. He'd make coffee, an $8 bag of community brand grounds from Harris Teeter, and read the news on his aging iPad, a third-generation model he'd had for nearly a decade. Bianca would sleep in, emerging around 10 a.m. in a silk robe he knew had cost $350 because he'd seen the credit card statement. She'd glide into the kitchen, her deep brown skin glowing, her long, elegant braids coiled into a bun at the nape of her neck. "Morning, babe," she'd murmur, kissing his cheek before pouring herself a cup of coffee, to which she'd add a splash of a $25 bottle of sugar-free vanilla syrup she ordered online. "Morning, B," he'd reply, his eyes tracking her as she moved about the space. He loved her grace, the way she made their simple rental apartment feel like a showroom. What he didn't realize was that she saw it as a temporary holding pen. Their finances were a study in contrast he'd chosen to interpret as balance. He was the saver, the planner. He managed the budget, tracked their expenses in a worn, leather-bound ledger, and diligently moved a portion of his paycheck into their joint savings account every 2 weeks. Bianca was the spender, the enjoyer of life, or so he told himself. Her job as a part-time marketing consultant for small boutiques brought in an inconsistent income, maybe $25,000 in a good year. Yet, her lifestyle told a different story. There were the shoes, a collection of Louboutins and Jimmy Choos that lived in their original boxes in her closet, each pair representing anywhere from $700 to $1,200. There were the handbags, a $2,200 YSL tote for every day, a $4,500 Chanel flap bag for special occasions. "They're investments, Marcus," she'd say with a dismissive wave of her hand when he'd gently question a purchase. A good bag holds its value. He, meanwhile, wore a pair of $120 Rockport shoes he'd had resoled twice. The most insidious deceptions were disguised as acts of affection or simple errands. Several times a year, Bianca would come to him with a stack of greeting cards. "Hey, honey, could you sign these for me? They're for my clients. Just a little thank you." There were birthday cards, holiday cards, and most frequently, congratulations cards. They were always for people he'd never met. The owner of a new yoga studio, a boutique proprietor who'd had a record sales month. The cards were always expensive, thick cardstock from a specialty paper store, probably $8 apiece. Inside, Bianca would have already written a generic, cheerful message. At the bottom, she'd leave a space. "Just sign your name here," she'd instruct, pointing to a blank spot. "It looks better with both our names. Shows we're a team." He'd sign. Marcus and Bianca Washington. He never read the fine print on the documents she'd occasionally slide into the stack. Tucked between a happy birthday and a congrats on the new venture would be a single-page document, a consent form, an authorization agreement, a signature guarantee. They were always presented casually, usually while he was watching a football game or tired after a long shift. "Just a few more, babe. Almost done." The pen would be in his hand, his mind on the Panthers' defense, and he would sign his name on the line she indicated without a second thought. He delivered mail for a living. He trusted the person handing him his own. It was a catastrophic mistake. He was signing away his future, one congratulatory card at a time. The woman who shared his bed, the woman whose $48 a jar night cream sat next to his $4 tube of chapstick on the bathroom counter, was methodically and patiently liquidating his life. The contrast was sharpest when they visited her sister, Alani. Alani lived in a sprawling, 3-story brick brownstone in Myers Park, a historic neighborhood where old money and new ambition mingled. The house was worth at least $1.8 million. Alani, who was 2 years older than Bianca, had what Bianca vaguely described as a consulting business. She was divorced, with no children, and lived a life of curated luxury. Her living room featured a $15,000 sectional sofa, abstract art that probably cost more than Marcus's car, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto a meticulously landscaped garden. During these visits, Marcus always felt like a foreign object, a piece of gravel in a finely tuned machine. The sisters would speak in a rapid-fire shorthand, laughing at inside jokes while he sat nursing a glass of water, feeling the weight of their judgment. He remembered one specific Sunday dinner. Bianca wore a new dress, a $900 design from a local boutique. Alani was in a casual-looking cashmere sweater that Marcus knew, from a quick Google search later, retailed for $1,500. He was in his best pair of chinos and a $45 polo shirt. They were discussing a recent vacation Alani had taken to Greece. "You simply must go, B," Alani said, swirling a glass of red wine that cost $150 a bottle. "The light in Santorini is just transformative." Bianca sighed dramatically. "I know, but things are tight. You know how Marcus is. He sees a penny on the sidewalk and has to stop and put it in his rainy day jar." The sisters shared a look, a quick, conspiratorial smirk that made Marcus's stomach clench. It was a look that said, "He's not one of us." Alani leaned forward, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper, though it was perfectly audible to him. "Well, rainy days are what savings are for. Some people just don't understand how to make money work for them. They just let it sit there, collecting dust." She glanced at Marcus. No offense. He just nodded, a tight smile on his face. "None taken. I believe in being prepared." Bianca patted his hand, a gesture that felt more like a pat on a dog's head. "Of course you do, honey, and it's sweet. It really is." The conversation moved on, but the sting of their condescension remained. He had no idea they weren't just talking about his financial philosophy. They were talking about his money, his inheritance, his life savings. They saw it as a stagnant pool of capital, and they had already drawn up the plans to divert it for their own use. The stable facade of his marriage wasn't just hiding cracks. It was a painted backdrop in front of an empty lot where his life used to be. The days following the discovery of the divorce papers and the empty bank account were a blur of cold dread. The official service of the papers came 2 days later, delivered by a grim-faced courier to his workplace. The humiliation of signing for them in front of his colleagues was a fresh, hot poker to the wound. The documents were thick with demands. Bianca, through her high-powered lawyer from a prestigious uptown firm, was claiming she was entitled to half of all marital assets, permanent alimony based on the lifestyle she had become accustomed to, and for Marcus to assume all marital debts, including the $28,000 in credit card charges she had racked up in her own name over the past year. It was a declaration of total war. The petition made no mention of the $580,000 she had already taken. From a legal standpoint, on paper, it looked like she had left an empty-handed husband and was seeking her fair share. His first phone call with her after he was served was surreal. He sat in his car in the Harris Teeter parking lot, the engine off, the phone feeling cold and heavy in his hand. She answered on the second ring, her voice breezy and unaffected. "Hello? Bianca, it's me." "Oh, Marcus, I figured you'd be calling," she said, a note of impatience in her tone. "Listen, I'm in the middle of something. My lawyer said we shouldn't speak directly. It just complicates things." "Complicates things?" His voice was rough, raw, with a pain so deep it felt physical. "You cleaned out our savings account, B. Everything. My mother's inheritance. Everything we saved. It's gone." There was a pause. He could hear the faint clinking of a fork against a plate. She was having lunch. "Marcus, you're being so dramatic. That money is marital property. I simply moved it for safekeeping. You know how you are. You would have tried to hide it." The audacity of the accusation stole his breath. He was the one who had saved, who had meticulously tracked every dollar while she had spent with abandon. "Hide it? Bianca, I never hid a single cent from you. We looked at the statements together every month." "Looked, yes. But you never understood," she said, her voice dripping with the familiar, condescending pity he now recognized as a weapon. "It's complex financial strategy. You wouldn't get it. Let the lawyers handle it. It's for the best." "Where is the money, Bianca?" "It's safe. That's all you need to know," she snapped. "And don't call me again. Talk to your lawyer, if you can even afford one." The line went dead. He sat in the silence of his car, the fluorescent lights of the parking lot buzzing overhead. If you can even afford one. The cruelty was breathtaking. She had taken every penny he had and then mocked him for his inability to defend himself. That was the moment the grief began to curdle, hardening into something cold and sharp. His sister, Lena, wired him $5,000 that night. "You pay me back when you can, little brother," she said, her voice fierce with protective anger. "You get the best lawyer you can find, you hear me? Don't let her do this to you." The next week was a series of escalating humiliations. He received a text from Alani, Bianca's sister. It was a picture of Bianca and her, clinking champagne glasses on the balcony of the Myers Park brownstone. The sun was setting behind them, casting them in a golden glow. The caption read, "To new beginnings and leaving dead weight behind." He didn't respond. He just stared at the image, the $15,000 sectional visible through the glass doors behind them, the city skyline twinkling. He was the dead weight. The man whose life savings were likely funding that very bottle of champagne. The final, most cutting exchange came a few days later. He had to call Bianca to coordinate getting some of his personal belongings from the apartment. She was living there, the rent now presumably being paid from his money, while he was sleeping on an air mattress in his sister's spare room. "I can leave a box on the porch," she said, her voice flat. "Just tell me what you want." "I need my mother's things, B, her photo albums, the rocking chair." His voice broke on the last word. The chair was a family heirloom, a piece of his history. "Oh, that old thing?" she scoffed. "It doesn't go with the decor at all. I was thinking of donating it. It's so drab." "Don't you dare," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "That is not yours to give away." She laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Everything is marital property now, Marcus. That's what the law says. You should really read the documents we send you." Then came the line, the one that would echo in his mind for months, the one that perfectly encapsulated 12 years of her contempt. "But I guess that's the problem, isn't it? He delivers mail, but he doesn't read his own." She hung up. Marcus lowered the phone, his hand trembling not with weakness, but with a sudden, clarifying rage. The grief was gone, burned away. In its place was a resolve as cold and hard as steel. She was right about one thing. He hadn't read the mail. He had trusted the sender. But he was a man who understood systems. He understood logistics. He understood how things moved from point A to point B, and he knew that every single transaction, every single piece of mail, leaves a trail. She and her sister thought he was a simple man, a pack mule, who carried things without understanding their value. They thought he was a relic, someone to be discarded when he was no longer useful. They had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated the quiet, methodical patience of a man who spends his life making sure everything gets to where it's supposed to go. He would now apply that same relentless focus to them. He would find his money, and he would make sure the bill for their betrayal was delivered directly to their door. The search for a lawyer was a demoralizing exercise in itself. The first two attorneys he met with, both from small firms in less than prestigious office parks, had looked at his situation with weary sympathy. They saw a man with no liquid assets fighting a woman with a nearly $600,000 head start, and a lawyer from a firm with a lobby that looked like a modern art museum. They quoted him retainers of $10,000 and $15,000, sums he simply didn't have. They advised him to settle, to try and negotiate for a small portion of the savings, and walk away. "It's a he said, she said," one lawyer told him, leaning back in his worn, $300 office chair. "Proving she took it with malicious intent is tough. She'll just claim she was protecting marital assets. You could spend tens of thousands fighting and end up with less than if you just settled now." Marcus refused to accept that. Walking away felt like validating their opinion of him, that he was someone who could be stolen from without consequence. On his sister's recommendation, he made one last appointment. The office of Anya Sharma, attorney at law, was on the second floor of a modest brick building in the Elizabeth neighborhood. There was no marble lobby, no receptionist offering sparkling water. There was just a clean, quiet waiting room with a few potted plants and a stack of magazines that were actually from the current month. Miss Sharma herself opened the door. She was a petite woman in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She wore a simple, well-tailored navy suit that probably cost a practical $600, and her hair was pulled back in a severe bun. She shook his hand firmly. "Marcus Washington, I'm Anya Sharma. Please, come in." Her office was small and impeccably organized. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with legal texts. The only personal touch was a single framed photo on her desk of her with a golden retriever. She charged $350 an hour, a fee that felt manageable, almost hopeful. Marcus spent 45 minutes laying out the entire story, his voice steady as he recounted the details. The empty account, the congratulations cards, the condescending phone calls, the text message from Alani. He handed her the divorce petition and the single bank statement he had. Anya Sharma listened without interruption, her pen making small, precise notes on a yellow legal pad. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the documents. "She's brazen," Anya said finally, her voice devoid of emotion. "And arrogant. That's good for us. Arrogant people make mistakes." She tapped the divorce petition. "Her lawyer is from Moore and Van Allen. They're sharks. But they're only as good as the information their client gives them. Bianca's petition claims zero liquid assets on her part and demands you disclose all of yours. The key is her sworn financial disclosure. Has she filed it yet?" "It came yesterday," Marcus said, pulling another envelope from his satchel. "May I?" Anya held out her hand. She spent the next 10 minutes reading the document, her focus absolute. It was a standard form, listing assets and liabilities. Under bank accounts, Bianca had listed only her personal checking account with a balance of $2,150. She had listed the credit card debt of $28,000. She had sworn, under penalty of perjury, that this was a complete and accurate picture of her financial situation. Anya's eyes narrowed slightly. She's claiming she has no access to the money she took. She's hiding it. And she's lying about it in a sworn statement to the court. This is our opening. She looked up at Marcus. "I need you to do something for me. It will cost about $150. I want a full credit report and a comprehensive background check on yourself. Specifically, I want to know if any lines of credit or business entities have been opened using your name, or, more importantly, your social security number in the last 2 years." The next 3 days were agonizing. Marcus went to work, supervised his routes, nodded to his colleagues, and functioned on autopilot. Inside, a storm of anxiety and hope raged. On Friday at 4:30 p.m., he was back in Anya Sharma's quiet office. The report was on her computer screen. "Okay, Marcus," she said, turning the monitor toward him. "Your credit is excellent. No surprises there. No new credit cards, no loans. Wait." She stopped, leaning closer to the screen. What is this? She pointed to a line item under business affiliations. It was an entry from the North Carolina Secretary of State. Entity name, Alani and Company Luxury Holdings, LLC. Date of formation, April 12th, 18 months ago. Registered agent, Alani Davis. Principal/organizer, Marcus J. Washington. SSN XXX-XX-XXXXXX. Marcus stared at the screen. The room went silent except for the low hum of the computer. His own name, his own social security number. He felt a wave of nausea, a dizzying sense of violation that was deeper and more profound than just the theft of his money. They hadn't just stolen from him, they had stolen him, his identity, his good name. They opened a shell company in your name, Anya said, her voice a low, angry hum. Your wife's sister is the registered agent, but you are listed as the sole organizer. This makes you, on paper, the owner of the entire company. But how? Marcus whispered, his throat tight. I would never. The signature cards, Anya said, her eyes flashing with understanding. The congratulations cards, the documents she slipped in between. She had you sign the LLC formation documents. She likely forged your signature on others. With your social security number and a signature she could replicate, she could do anything. Anya began typing furiously. She's funneled the money from your joint account into this LLC. It's a classic fraudulent conveyance. She moved a marital asset into a third-party entity to shield it from the divorce proceedings. But she made a fatal, arrogant error. She looked at Marcus, a grim smile touching her lips for the first time. She put your name on it. She was so confident you'd never look, so sure of your ignorance, that she tied the entire crime directly to you. She thought she was being clever, hiding the money under your own nose. What she actually did was create a perfect, irrefutable paper trail right back to herself. At 5:47 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, in a small law office smelling of old paper and fresh coffee, the crushing weight of betrayal began to lift, replaced by the cold, clear light of strategy. Marcus looked at his name on the screen, listed as the owner of a company he never knew existed. Bianca's words echoed in his head. He delivers mail, but he doesn't read his own. She was wrong. He was about to read every single line, and then he was going to deliver the consequences himself. Certified mail? Signature required? The weeks that followed were a master class in strategic restraint. Anya's instructions were simple and absolute. Say nothing, do nothing, act defeated. We need them to stay arrogant. We need them to walk into that courtroom believing they have already won. It was the hardest acting job of Marcus's life. Every instinct screamed at him to confront Bianca, to lay the evidence on the table and watch her face crumble. But Anya was adamant. The trap was set. Now they had to wait for the prey to walk into it. He had to engage with Bianca to maintain the facade. The first test came a week after the discovery of the LLC. He called her. Following a script he and Anya had rehearsed, he let his voice sound tired, broken. Bianca, he started, letting out a long, weary sigh. I spoke to another lawyer. They all say the same thing. I can't afford to fight you. He could almost hear her smirk through the phone. I told you, Marcus, this is out of your league. Just sign the papers. She was at her sister's house. He could hear Alani laughing in the background. I can't just sign them, he said, injecting a note of desperation into his tone. You're asking for everything, the alimony. I'll be ruined. I make $61,000 a year. I can't pay you alimony and live. You should have thought of that before, she said coolly. You were happy to let me handle the complex things. This is the result. You want a simple life? This is it. Please be, he pleaded, hating the way the words tasted in his mouth. Can't we just talk about the savings? If I could just have a little of it back, maybe 50,000? Just to get on my feet. You can have the rest. I won't fight you on it. There was a pause. He heard her whispering to Alani. Then she was back on the line, her voice dripping with magnanimous condescension. 50,000? Marcus, the lawyer's fees alone will be more than that. But, you know what? I'll talk to my attorney. Maybe we can arrange something. It shows you're being reasonable. Thank you, he breathed, as if she had just handed him a lifeline. Thank you, Bianca. He hung up the phone, his hands clenched into fists. He felt sick with the deception, but also a grim, electric thrill. She had taken the bait. She believed he was broken, ready to beg for scraps from his own table. A few days later, he had to go to the apartment to retrieve the box of his belongings she'd agreed to leave outside. He arrived at 7 p.m. after his shift. The box was there, sitting next to the welcome mat. It was a flimsy cardboard box that had once held a case of wine. Inside, he found a few changes of clothes, his toothbrush, and 2 of his mother's photo albums. The rocking chair was gone. Rage, pure and white-hot, surged through him. He took a deep breath, forcing it down. Act defeated. He texted her. Marcus, got the box. Thank you. Did you happen to see my mom's rocking chair? Her reply came back almost instantly. Bianca, I told you. It's gone. Donated it to Goodwill last week. You can probably get a tax receipt if you want. Let it go. It was just old junk, just old junk. He stared at the words on his phone screen. That chair was where his mother had rocked him to sleep. It was where she'd sat, frail but smiling. During her last few months, it was a piece of his soul. And to Bianca, it was junk, easily discarded. Its only value a potential tax deduction. He saved a screenshot of the text. It was another piece of evidence, not of a financial crime, but of a cruelty so profound it was almost incomprehensible. This screenshot would become Exhibit G in his filing, evidence of malice. The final performance was the most difficult. Per Anya's strategy, he had to make a formal settlement offer through her, an offer so low it would seem pathetic. They offered to waive any claim to the missing $580,000 in exchange for Bianca dropping her demand for alimony and them each walking away with their own debt. Bianca's lawyer responded within 24 hours with a counteroffer that was a slap in the face. They rejected his terms outright. They reiterated their demand for permanent alimony of $2,500 a month, and they added a new stipulation. Marcus was to turn over his 401k, which had a balance of around $124,000, as a lump sum payment to Bianca. Anya read the email to him over the phone. They're overplaying their hand, she said, a note of satisfaction in her voice. They think you're desperate. They think they can take everything. They have no idea what's coming. He spent his days at the post office, a model of quiet efficiency. He managed schedules, resolved customer complaints, and ensured the endless river of mail flowed smoothly through his station. No one knew that he spent his evenings in his sister's spare room, surrounded by financial documents, building a case that would dismantle his wife's entire world. He was living a double life. To Bianca and Alani, he was the simple mailman, crushed and confused. To Anya Sharma, he was the star witness and lead investigator in his own case. He was playing dumb, but he had never felt smarter. He was acting weak, but he had never felt stronger. He was a man hollowed out by betrayal, but he was filling that emptiness with cold, hard facts. Each lie he told, each humiliation he swallowed, was another nail in the coffin they were building for themselves. The war room was Anya Sharma's conference room. It wasn't glamorous. It was a simple 10 by 12 foot space with a sturdy oak table, 6 chairs, and a large whiteboard. For 3 weeks, this room became the epicenter of Marcus's life. The cost was mounting. Anya's $350 hourly rate felt like a taxi meter running in his head, but he saw it as an investment in justice. His sister's $5,000 was long gone, and he was now putting the legal fees on a new credit card with a punishing 22.99% APR. But every time he swiped it, he pictured Bianca's face when the truth came out. The strategy was methodical, a reflection of both Anya's legal mind and Marcus's own procedural nature. "We don't just present a theory," Anya explained, uncapping a red dry erase marker. "We present an irrefutable chain of evidence. Each link has to be forged from their own actions." The first step was a subpoena to Bank of America for the complete records of their former joint savings account. The documents arrived a week later, a stack of papers 6 inches thick. Marcus and Anya spent an entire Saturday going through them, page by page. The coffee in the office pot grew bitter as the hours passed. "Here," Marcus said, his finger tracing a line on a statement from 19 months ago. "The first big withdrawal, April 12th, a wire transfer for $250,000. Anya made a note. The same day the LLC was formed. And the transfer destination? "An account at Truist Bank," Marcus read. "Account name, Alani and Comert Luxury Holdings, LLC. They found 3 more major transfers over the next year, one for $150,000, another for $100,000, and a final one for $83,000, just 2 months before Bianca filed for divorce. The total came to $583,000. Each transfer was initiated online, but because of the amount, each one had required a secondary verification, a code sent to a phone number on file. "Whose phone number was it?" Anya asked. Marcus's blood ran cold. It was hers. She changed the primary contact number on the account 6 months before the first transfer. She said it was for convenience, so she'd get the fraud alerts since she did more of the online banking. I didn't think anything of it. It was another small, seemingly innocent act that was part of a much larger, sinister plan. The next subpoena went to Truist Bank for the records of the LLC. This was the mother lode. The statement showed the money flowing in from the joint account and then flowing out in a steady stream. "Look at this," Anya said, her voice tight with controlled fury. She pointed to a series of transactions. $75,000 down payment on a 2023 Porsche Macan. The car is registered to Alani Davis. The car, a luxury SUV, had a sticker price of over $90,000. Another $200,000 transferred to a brokerage account in Alani's name, Marcus read, his own voice hollow. There were payments to high-end contractors for renovations on the Myers Park brownstone, totaling over $150,000. There were purchases at designer boutiques, charges for first-class airfare to Italy and France, and a single staggering payment of $50,000 to Moore and Van Allen, the retainer for Bianca's divorce lawyer. "My God," Marcus whispered, "she paid for her lawyer with my money. With my mother's inheritance." Anya highlighted the line with a yellow marker. "This is it. This is the smoking gun. It proves direct intent. She used the fraudulently conveyed funds to finance the legal action against you. No judge in the country will look kindly on that." The final piece of the puzzle was the LLC formation document itself, which they obtained directly from the North Carolina Secretary of State's office for a fee of $15. There it was in black and white, Marcus J. Washington, organizer, and at the bottom, a signature. It was a near-perfect forgery of his own, but not quite. The M was slightly too rounded, the loop on his S a little too sharp. It was the kind of detail only he would notice. Anya compiled everything into a single, damning binder. It was divided into tabs. Tab A, Bianca's sworn financial disclosure, stating she had no assets. Tab B, the LLC formation documents, showing Marcus as the owner, but Alani as the agent. Tab C, the joint bank account statements, showing the 4 transfers totaling $583,000. Tab D, the LLC's bank statements, showing the money coming in and then being used for cars, renovations, and Bianca's legal fees. Tab E, the car registration for the Porsche Macan in Alani's name. Tab F, the email from Bianca's lawyer demanding Marcus's 401k. Tab G, the screenshot of the text message about the rocking chair. The binder was thick, heavy, and irrefutable. It told a story not of a marriage ending, but of a long-term criminal conspiracy. "We file this as a motion for an emergency hearing," Anya said, closing the binder with a decisive snap. "We're alleging perjury, fraudulent conveyance, and conspiracy. We are not asking for a settlement. We are asking the judge to dissolve the LLC, return every single cent of the $583,000 to you as your sole and separate property, sanction Bianca for perjuring herself, and award you full legal fees." She looked at Marcus, her expression serious. "Are you ready for this? Once we file this, there's no going back. It will be ugly." Marcus thought of his mother's rocking chair, discarded like trash. He thought of the smug look on Alani's face in that picture. He thought of Bianca's voice on the phone, dripping with contempt. He delivers mail, but he doesn't read his own. "I'm ready," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Deliver it." The Mecklenburg County Courthouse was a modern, imposing structure of glass and steel, a place where lives were redirected by the stroke of a pen. On the morning of December 5th, the air inside was thick with the scent of floor polish and low-grade anxiety. Marcus sat beside Anya Sharma at the plaintiff's table in courtroom 4B. He wore his only suit, a charcoal gray number he'd bought for a wedding 5 years ago for $400 from Men's Warehouse. It felt a little tight in the shoulders. His hands rested on the table, still and calm. He felt strangely detached, like a spectator at his own life. Across the aisle, Bianca and Alani sat with Bianca's lawyer, a man named Mr. Davies, who looked like he was carved from granite and wore an $8,000 Brioni suit. Bianca looked radiant. She wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost $1,200 and smiled confidently at her sister. She shot a glance at Marcus, a flicker of pity and annoyance in her eyes, before turning back to whisper to Mr. Davies. They had no idea what was coming. The trap was about to spring. The judge, a stern-faced woman named Judge Eleanor Vance, entered the room, and everyone rose. She had a reputation for being sharp, fair, and having zero tolerance for dishonesty. "We are here for an emergency hearing on a motion filed by the respondent, Mr. Washington," Judge Vance began, her eyes scanning the documents before her. "Mr. Davies, are you aware of the contents of this motion?" Mr. Davies rose, looking slightly flustered. "Your Honor, we only received this filing late yesterday. It appears to be a collection of baseless and inflammatory accusations. My client, Ms. Washington, is the victim here, a woman left with nothing who is simply asking for what she is entitled to under the law." Anya Sharma stood. She was calm, her voice measured. "Your Honor, we are not here to discuss accusations. We are here to discuss facts, documented in the binder before you. And the central fact is this: Ms. Washington committed perjury on the sworn financial disclosure she submitted to this court." A murmur went through the small gallery. Bianca's smile faltered. She looked at Mr. Davies, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "That is a serious charge, Ms. Sharma," the judge said, her gaze fixed on Anya. "You had better be able to back it up." "I can, Your Honor," Anya replied. "With your permission, I'd like to direct your attention to Tab A of the binder. Ms. Washington's financial disclosure, where she lists a total of $2,150 in liquid assets. Now please turn to tab B. The judge flipped the page. There was a long silence as she read the LLC formation document. Her eyebrows rose, almost imperceptibly. Alani and Company Luxury Holdings, LLC, the judge read aloud. Formed April 12th of last year. Registered agent Alani Davis. Organizer Marcus J. Washington. She looked over her glasses, first at Marcus, then at Bianca. Ms. Washington, are you familiar with this entity? Bianca hesitated, glancing at her lawyer, who gave a slight shake of his head. No, Your Honor, I've never heard of it. It was the first lie, uttered under oath. Interesting, the judge said dryly. Ms. Sharma, continue. Your Honor, Anya said, now please turn to tab C, the statements from the parties' joint savings account. You will note 4 wire transfers beginning on April 12th of last year, the same day the LLC was formed, totaling $583,412. The recipient of all 4 transfers was a bank account belonging to Alani and Company Luxury Holdings, LLC. The money in that savings account was Mr. Washington's separate property, a combination of a family inheritance and premarital savings. But for the sake of this argument, let's call it a marital asset. Mr. Davies was on his feet. Objection, Your Honor. This is speculation. There's no proof my client had anything to do with these transfers. Proof is in tab D, Your Honor, Anya said without missing a beat, which contains the complete bank statements for the LLC. You will find that the funds were used by Ms. Washington and her sister, Ms. Davis, for personal enrichment. We have receipts for a $90,000 Porsche registered to Ms. Davis, $150,000 in home renovations for her personal residence, first-class travel, and, most notably, Anya paused for effect, letting the silence hang in the air. You call a payment of $50,000 to the firm of Moore and Van Allen, paid from the LLC's account, as a retainer for this very divorce proceeding. The room went completely still. Mr. Davies' face went from tanned and confident to a pasty, sickly white. He slowly sat down, looking at Bianca as if seeing her for the first time. Bianca stared straight ahead, her face a mask of disbelief. Alani, next to her, had begun to tremble. Judge Vance slowly removed her glasses and placed them on her desk. She looked at Bianca, her eyes like chips of ice. Ms. Washington, the judge said, her voice dangerously quiet. You signed a document, under penalty of perjury, stating you had assets of $2,000. The evidence before me suggests you had access to and benefited from an account containing over $500,000 of marital funds, which you then used to pay your attorney to sue your husband for money he no longer had because you had already taken it. Before I consider referring this matter to the district attorney's office for a perjury investigation, is there anything you would like to say? Bianca's composure finally shattered. Her eyes filled with tears, her voice a high-pitched wail. It wasn't like that. He doesn't understand money. It was just sitting there. I was making it work for us. Marcus, tell them. She turned to Marcus, her face a desperate plea. Tell them, Marcus. It was for us, for our future. Marcus looked at her. He felt nothing. No anger, no pity. Just a vast, quiet emptiness. He thought of her words. He delivers mail, but he doesn't read his own. He looked at the judge. Your Honor, he said, his voice clear and steady. The only future she was planning was her own. The strike was complete. It wasn't a loud explosion, but a quiet, fatal implosion. The foundation of their lies, built on an assumption of his ignorance, had collapsed under the simple, undeniable weight of the truth. The aftermath was not a single event, but a cascade of consequences, each one a direct result of the choices Bianca and Alani had made. Judge Vance's ruling was swift and brutal. The courtroom, which had been buzzing with whispers, fell silent as she delivered her judgment from the bench, First, she declared the entity, Alani and Company Luxury Holdings, LLC, to be a fraudulent instrument created for the sole purpose of hiding marital assets. She ordered its immediate dissolution. Second, she ruled that the entire sum of $583,412, plus any interest or gains earned, was to be returned to Marcus within 72 hours. She declared it his sole and separate property, citing the clear evidence of his inheritance and the malicious intent behind the transfers. "This is not a division of assets," the judge stated, looking directly at Bianca. "This is the return of stolen property." A court-appointed receiver was assigned to oversee the immediate liquidation of the LLC's assets. Third, she found Bianca in contempt of court for committing perjury. She was fined $10,000 and sentenced to 100 hours of community service. The judge explicitly stated she was referring the case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. "This court will not tolerate being lied to," Judge Vance said, her voice ringing with authority. Fourth, she ordered Bianca to pay for all of Marcus's legal fees, which had climbed to just over $22,500. Finally, she dismissed Bianca's petition for divorce with prejudice, meaning she could not refile with the same claims. Any future divorce would start from a position where Bianca had zero assets and Marcus had his nearly $600,000 restored. The demands for alimony and his 401k were rendered laughable. As the judge spoke, Mr. Davies, Bianca's lawyer, quietly packed his expensive leather briefcase. He leaned over and whispered something to Bianca. Marcus couldn't hear the words, but the meaning was clear from the look of horror on her face. He was dropping her as a client. He couldn't risk his firm's reputation by being associated with perjury and fraud. Bianca and Alani were left sitting at the table alone. The consequences for Alani were just as severe. The receiver immediately placed a lien on her $1.8 million Myers Park brownstone to recover the $150,000 in renovation funds. The 2023 Porsche Macan was seized from her garage the next day, destined for auction. The brokerage account, which had grown to nearly $220,000, was frozen, and its contents wired directly to a new account Anya had set up for Marcus. The first sign of the victory for Marcus was an alert on his phone 2 days later, at 11:02 a.m., while he was on his lunch break. It was a notification from Bank of America. Deposit notification. A wire transfer of $221,087.14 has been received. It was the money from Alani's brokerage account. He stared at the numbers, his hand trembling slightly. It was real. The rest of the money came in over the next week as the receiver clawed it back. By the following Friday, his new account balance read $584,119.28. The extra $700 was interest. Then came the voicemails. They started the evening of the court date. The first one from Bianca was angry, accusatory. "How could you do this to me, Marcus? To us? After everything? You humiliated me. You ruined my life." The second, an hour later, was pleading. Okay. You made your point. You won. Can we just talk? Please? There has to be a way to fix this. I'll give you some of the money back. We can split it. Please. Marcus, call me. The third came from Alani, spitting venom. "You think you're so clever, you little mailman. You'll regret this. We're not done. This is not over." The fourth, from Bianca again, came late that night. She was crying, her voice thick and slurring. "My sister, they're going to take her house. The car is gone. My lawyer dropped me. I have nothing, Marcus. I have nothing. You took everything from me." He listened to the message, the phrase echoing in his head. "You took everything from me." The irony was so profound it was almost poetic. He hadn't taken anything. He had simply reclaimed what was his. She was the one who had taken everything, his trust, his security, his mother's memory, and gambled it away on a bet that he was too simple to notice. The final communication was an email from a generic account a month later. It was from Bianca. She had been charged with perjury by the DA's office. She was asking him to write a letter to the prosecutor to tell them it was all a misunderstanding. She said she was sorry. She said she had made a terrible mistake. She said she still loved him. Marcus read the email, then he moved it to a folder Anya had created for him labeled Evidence. He didn't reply. Forgiveness might come one day, for his own peace of mind. But absolution was not his to give. The consequences were hers and hers alone. They were the bill for her choices, delivered with the cold, impartial efficiency he had learned from the postal system itself. And the postage was fully paid. 1 year later. The Charlotte sun, bright and unfiltered, streamed through the large window of a small, clean office in a commercial park just off I-77. The space wasn't glamorous. The walls were painted a simple, functional gray. The desk was a sturdy, $400 model from IKEA, not a slab of mahogany. The chair didn't cost more than his car, but it was all his. The sign on the door read, Queen City Logistics, LLC, Marcus Washington, proprietor. The past year had been one of methodical rebuilding. After the legal battle, Marcus had felt a profound shift within himself. The quiet stability he had once craved felt too passive. The experience with Bianca had taught him a brutal lesson. True security didn't come from saving money. It came from creating value. It came from owning your own path. He had seen a notice for bids on a new USPS contract route, a bulk delivery route serving commercial clients across Mecklenburg County. It was a larger-scale operation than anything he had ever supervised. It required a business plan, proof of capital, and a commercial vehicle. Using a portion of his recovered savings, he put down $80,000 to purchase 2 used but reliable Ford Transit cargo vans. He spent weeks crafting a business plan, using the same meticulous attention to detail he'd once used to track his household budget. His bid was lean, efficient, and smart. He won the contract. He resigned from his job as a supervisor, a bittersweet moment after over 20 years of service. On his last day, his old colleagues threw him a small party in the break room, chipping in for a sheet cake from Harris Teeter and a gift card. They saw him as a man who had taken a bold risk. They had no idea it was a risk born from ruin. Now, at 40 years old, Marcus was an employer. He had hired 2 drivers, good men named David and Ray, paying them a competitive wage of $24 an hour, plus benefits. He spent his days not just managing, but building. He was negotiating fuel contracts, optimizing delivery routes with new software, and cultivating relationships with his commercial clients. His company was profitable within 6 months. He was on track to clear over $150,000 in his first year, after all expenses and salaries were paid. He lived in a small, new apartment in Plaza Midwood, a place he'd chosen for its character and proximity to his office. It was half the size of the Noda apartment, but felt twice as much like home. The walls were decorated not with expensive art, but with framed maps of his delivery routes and a picture of his parents. In the corner, there was a rocking chair. It wasn't his mother's. That was a loss he could never recover. But he had found a similar one at an antique shop. A simple oak chair with a beautiful grain. He'd paid $250 for it. And sometimes at the end of a long day, he would sit in it and look out the window. A sense of quiet, earned peace settling over him. He hadn't heard from Bianca in months. The last he knew, she had pleaded guilty to the perjury charge to avoid jail time and was serving 2 years of probation. Alani had managed to avoid foreclosure by taking out a high-interest mortgage to pay back the lien. But her lifestyle was drastically curtailed. The sisters who had once sipped champagne and looked down on the world from their Myers Park balcony were now grounded by the harsh reality of their own choices. One afternoon, Marcus had an unexpected visitor at his office. It was a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. Her name was Imani, and she ran a non-profit that provided business attire to women re-entering the workforce. She was a client on his delivery route, and she had come to thank him personally for his reliable service. They talked for an hour about logistics, about Charlotte, about the joy of building something from nothing. He felt a spark of connection he hadn't felt in years, one built on mutual respect and shared values, not on assets and appearances. He asked her to dinner. She said yes. Life, he was learning, is a lot like the mail. You can't control what gets sent to you. Sometimes it's a gift, sometimes it's a bill, and sometimes it's a notice of demolition for the life you thought you had. But you do have control over what you send out. You can choose to send out bitterness and revenge, or you can choose to send out integrity, hard work, and purpose. True wealth isn't the number in your bank account. It's the value of what you build and the character you build it with. It's the quiet satisfaction of a job well done, a promise kept, and a future you own. Free and clear. What do you think is the most important quality for rebuilding your life after a major setback? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's continue this conversation about resilience and new beginnings. Thank you for being a part of the Love Beyond Pride community.